What's up, guys? Welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Riddell, and in today's video, I'm going to be going over a game I had against Novice Noah on the Coffee Chess YouTube channel. If you guys haven't heard of Coffee Chess already, it's basically a group of about 10 to 12 guys that come together, play chess, sometimes talk trash, and overall just have a good time. In this game, I was black against Novice Noah, the 16-year-old prodigy, and I'm not gonna lie, guys. I'm counting my days. I think right now we're pretty even in level, but he's definitely gonna pass me pretty soon. So I'm counting my days, getting my last few wins that I can, because in a couple years it's not even gonna be a game. So here I was black, and he started off with knight f3, and I played the Sicilian invitation with c5. This is called the Sicilian invitation because it invites white to play e4, transposing into the Sicilian defense. But here Noah went with the move g3, solid move, fianchettoing his bishop, and I played knight c6, followed by the move e5. Now, e5 is honestly, guys, a pretty aggressive move, really looking to take control of the center, especially this d4 square, both with the e-pawn and the c-pawn. And on top of that, here black is threatening to play e4, kicking the knight back to g1 or h4. So after I played the move e5, here Noah played d3, preventing that e4 idea. And now I decided to fianchetto my own bishop with g6, followed by bishop g7. And here Noah really has done a good job of developing in the opening and keeping his flexibility. Here he could play the move c4 or e4. These are probably the two best moves, at least in terms of pawn structure. c4 would kind of transpose into an English type position, but here he went with the move e4, and I played d6, and here he played knight c3, knight g e7, and now he plays knight e1. Now, I continued with castles kingside, and now Novice Noah played knight e2. Now, some of you are probably wondering, like, what is he doing? Why would he put his knight on e1 and e2? I mean, the knight on the rim is dim, right? Well, these are actually two very good moves. And really what this does is it opens up the possibility of an f4 push. Here Noah wants to play f4, and eventually, maybe even f5 or f takes e5, create some space on the king side of the board, and maybe eventually even get a king side attack on my king on g8. Now, when I saw these two moves, they may seem pretty passive, but they're actually pretty aggressive, looking to take control of the king side. So here I decided to strike with the move f5, and Noah didn't back down as he played the move f4. And here, guys, I think there's a lot of different options. I can take with the e-pawn. I can take with the f-pawn. I could even play the move queen b6. I honestly think queen b6 is probably the best option here. But here I played the move f takes e4. And after d takes e4, knight d4. Now, here the knight is controlling the center of the board. And it might be tempting for white to play a move like knight takes d4. But Noah was very wise to not do this. Here I would take on d4, and now black has a very strong pawn chain in the center of the board. Yes, the d pawns are doubled, but at the same time we have an e-pawn here, and these pawns are very well supported by the bishop on g7 and the queen on d8. And really, guys, this pawn on d4 is really a nuisance for white and developing the pieces. Let's just say white plays f takes e5. Well, now I'd be able to take the rook on f1, take on e5, and following a move like bishop c4 check, play king h8, and after knight d3, play bishop h3. And, you know, guys, it's not like white's losing this position by any means, but we have a very strong bishop on h3, a solid bishop on g7, defending the e5 and d4 pawns, a knight on c6 that is going to become very active in this game, and a rook that's going to come to c8, attack the bishop on c4, and really put some pressure on the c2 pawn once that bishop moves. So again, I think Noah was wise to avoid this. Instead of taking the knight, Noah played c3, and here I could have played the move knight e6, but honestly, guys, I think the best move is taking on e2, and after queen takes e2, I played queen c7, followed by the move b6 and a5. Now, yes, guys, this definitely isn't a normal setup with e5, d6, c5, b6, and a5. But really, guys, the reason I decided to do this, for better or for worse, was because my bishop on c8. I wanted this bishop to be active, and I wanted it to have some flexibility. You always want to have your pawns on the opposite color of your bishop, and this bishop on g7, there's really not much I can do to make it more active. So really, my main priority is making the bishop on c8 active, and for that reason, I put the pawns on dark squares. On top of that, it really does control the center of the board on d4, b4, and really all these other squares, all these light squares you guys see here are going to be controlled by the bishop on c8. Here Noah went with f takes e5, and after d takes e5, I actually think that Noah may have missed a small little opportunity here with the move rook takes f8 check. Why would he do this? Well, after bishop takes f8, now Noah could play the move knight f2, and here, guys, I mean, black's not losing, but black is a little bit behind in development. Black's position is a little bit awkward. I mean, none of these pieces are bad, but they're not really that great either. I mean, let's just say I play bishop g7, trying to slowly crawl a normal looking position back. Well, now Noah would have been able to play queen c4 check, followed by rook d1. And let's just say I try to develop, right? I mean, in chess, you want to develop your pieces. Let's say I play bishop b7. Well, now queen e6 can be played, threatening rook d7, attacking the queen and the knight. And if bishop c6, now we have knight g4. And white is clearly better here, putting a lot of pressure on that e5 pawn, the d7 square, the knight on e7, the bishop on c6. I mean, really, black's whole position here is one move away from falling apart. So I think that Noah missed a small opportunity there by taking the rook on f8. Instead, Noah played the move b3, which is not a bad move at all. I mean, b3 is actually a pretty solid move. And against b3, I played the move bishop a6. And here Noah played c4. Now, c4 isn't the worst move, but I definitely don't think it was a very good decision strategically, because now this d4 square is weak. You always want to be careful to not create a hole in chess. Now, guys, a hole in chess is basically a square that for the rest of the game could not be defended by a pawn. For the rest of this game, there's not going to be a pawn that can defend this d4 square. And eventually, I'll be able to play pretty easily knight c6, followed by knight d4, and either white's going to have to decide to have a very annoying knight in the very center of the board, or take it and allow me to have a passed pawn 3 squares away from promotion. Here I play the move bishop b7, redirecting the bishop. As you guys can see, I mean, this bishop really isn't doing much now. So I played bishop b7, putting some pressure on the e4 pawn. And after knight f2, I played knight c6. And after knight g4, I played the move knight d4, putting my knight in the center of the board, guys. Knights are always better in the center of the board because they touch more squares. For example, this knight right now touches e2, f3, f5, e6, c6, b5, b3, and c2. Yes, guys, that was a rant. That was a lot of squares. But that knight attacks 8 squares, and if I put it on, let's say, the corner of the board, it could only, attack a couple. So here Noah realized that this knight was very powerful and decided to take it, but in doing so allows me to play c takes d4, and now I have a very strong pawn on d4, not that far from promotion. Here Noah plays knight f2, and here with knight f2, I saw an opportunity. In chess, the general rule is that you want to use your rooks on the open files. What is an open file? An open file is a file where there's no pawns. So if we're going up and down, that's a file. If we're going side to side, that is a rank. So right here, this is called the F file, from F8 to F1. This is the only open file here. Every other file has a pawn on it. So I'd much rather put my rooks on this file than any other one. So here I played the move rook f7, and after knight d3, I doubled up with rook a f8. And now, as you guys can see, I created a small little battering ram with a rook on f8 and f7 attacking the rook on f1. And here Noah, in typical Novice Noah fashion, decided to take the rook on f7 and trade for the endgame. If you guys haven't watched Coffee Chess, Noah loves his endgames. Not sure how else to say that. He loves his endgames, and I don't. But usually he's pretty successful in getting me to the endgame. So he was this game for sure. Here he played rook f1, and now I took on f1. And after queen takes f1, I played queen f7. Now, guys, queen f7 is okay, but I think queen f7 definitely makes the game a little bit drawish. I think better here was the move h6, and after a move like h4, play queen e7, followed by, say, bishop f8, maybe an eventual bishop a6. We're basically in a very similar position as we would have if we traded queens, except now we have a queen on e7 and a queen on e2. So it definitely adds some tension to the game. But instead of doing this, for some reason, I decided to play queen f7. And after queen takes f7 check and king takes f7, I would still give black a slight edge. Black has a bishop pair on b7 and g7, and on top of that has a very strong passed pawn on d4, supported by the pawn on e5. Here, Novice Noah goes with king f2, looking to activate his king. In the endgame, you want to activate your king. And now I played h5, looking to expand on the king side of the board. We see king e2, bishop c8, and now the move c5. Now, guys, in this position, honestly, even though I've put all my pawns on dark squares, this bishop can't really do much right now. I mean, it can move around. It can go to a6, it can go to e6. You can even put it on g4 and make a little check. But overall, there's really not much this bishop can do. So because of that, I think c5 was a slight mistake from Noah, because now I can play b takes c5. And after knight takes c5, play bishop c8. This bishop attacking the knight on c5, kicking the knight back to d3. And now I'm able to play bishop a6. See, guys, before we had a pawn on c4, so the bishop was kind of useless. But now this bishop is very active, pinning the knight to the king on d3. Here Noah saw that the knight was pinned to the king, so Noah played king d2. And here I continued with king e6, followed by king d6. And after g4, I played h4. Now, guys, I really don't see why g4 should be played here. By playing g4, basically, Noah is locking up his light squared bishop. I played h4, and now as you guys can see, this bishop on h3 is pretty cramped and uncomfortable. It's basically a tall pawn. It can, see that pawn. It can see that pawn. It can see that knight, but overall, this bishop really isn't doing much right now. So because of that, Noah plays bishop f1, trying to somehow get that bishop back in this game. And here I played the move bishop h6. Now, later in this game, I had an idea that I used, but I could have done it right now. Right now, I could have played the move bishop b7, attacking the pawn on e4. And what's the idea here? Well, after bishop g2, I can now check on h6, and after king e1, play h3, attacking the bishop on g2. And after a move like bishop f3, now I could play bishop e3. And after knight f2, bishop a6. Now, some of you are wondering, and this is really why I didn't play it. I kind of saw that this pawn on h3 is kind of weak. But this pawn on d4 is stronger. After a move like knight takes h3, I would have been able to play d3, and here white is in huge trouble. Let's just say white plays a3. Well, now I can play d2 check, followed by bishop f1, and as you guys can see, this knight is being attacked by the bishop on f1 and is being trapped by the bishop on e3. Beautiful position here, the bishop pair doing it together. And after knight f2, I can take the knight, and after king takes d2, and king c5, this king's about to come into this game, and black is completely winning. But guys, I missed this idea and instead played the move bishop h6 check. And here Noah had the opportunity to play king e2, and I totally understand why Novice Noah did not want to do this. I mean, who would want to move their king to a square that it's being pinned by a bishop on a6? I mean, if the king goes here, the knight literally can't move because the bishop's pinning it, and the king can't move because this bishop on h6 is piercing into the e3 and d2 square. So it makes logical sense that he didn't do this, but with the king on e2, the key idea is that after bishop b7, king f3 can be played. But here he plays king c2, and now I had an opportunity to again play bishop b7, forcing the bishop to defend, in which case I could play the move h3. Notice how knight f2 wouldn't work because bishop e3 could be played. Following this, I now played bishop e3, again missing the idea. And for one last time, Noah had the opportunity to play h3, lock the position up, and potentially hold on for a draw. But here he played a3, and I finally, 4 moves later, saw the idea and played bishop b7, followed by h3. And guys, the whole idea here is that after bishop takes h3 and bishop takes e4, yes, we're still even in material, But now we have a very strong bishop pair on e3 and e4 and 2 passed pawns on d4 and e5. And there's really no way for white to stop these pawns. Let's just say bishop f1 is played. Well, now I can play bishop g5, followed by king d5. Just slowly keep improving my position, slowly keep making the game better on my side. And after b4, take the pawn, play king c4. Notice how I'm just creeping in. Needless to say, black's completely winning this game. So Noah, seeing that bishop takes h3 wasn't a good idea, played bishop f3, looking to hold on. And now I locked up the position with g5. I realized just how weak this bishop on f3 is. It's basically a tall pawn defending g4 and e4, and I really wanted to lock it up with my g5, e5, and d4 pawns. And yes, guys, the h3 pawn could be seen as weak, but it's not really too bad because it's hard for white to attack it. Knight f2 can't be played, knight f4 can't be played, and here he played the move b4. Looking to expand on the queen side of the board, trying to find some counterplay here, but now I took the pawn on b4 and again activated my bishop with bishop c6, basically looking to slowly creep into this game. And now after king b3, I played bishop b5, attacking the knight on d3. And here I think Noah's best bet was probably bishop e2, and even after this I think that white's losing, but now after knight c5, I had the move bishop f1, and black is completely winning this game because after king c2, I'm now able to play bishop g2, and this bishop can't be taken because the pawn can take and make a queen. So now we see bishop e2, and now the pawn on h4 is very weak. I'm able to play bishop f4, followed by bishop takes h2, and now knight b7 check was played. I simply played king c7, followed by bishop f4. Now this pawn 2 steps away from promotion, and now we see knight e6 check, king d6. Here Noah snatches off the bishop. I take with the g-pawn, and here after g5, it was a blitz game, and Noah ran out of time, so I won the game. But even if he did have some time, obviously this pawn is a lot closer than the white pawn on g5. So guys, I do hope that you enjoyed this game and learned something from both my good moves and my bad moves. Novice Noah is a super good player, only 16. You know, honestly, I was kind of lucky to win this game. And go check out Coffee Chess if you get the chance. I'll leave that in the description below. And I'm wishing you guys a great day. Peace. Thanks for watching today's video. If you'd like to watch another one, you can click or tap up here. And I've got a lot more high quality chess content on the way. So if you'd like to subscribe, you can click or tap down here. I really appreciate your support.